across the street, you know, again, Grand Rapids, they call the city of churches. Other places they call the city of churches. Detroit has an extraordinary amount of churches, both churches that have gone into, say, old banks and old buildings and redeveloped those buildings, but ones that were originally built as churches, like this one across the street. So this is the Cathedral of the Church of St. Paul. It is the cathedral, or the cathedral, which means big chair, of the Episcopal Diocese of Detroit. So this building, actually, when it was built this was built in 1907, but the Episcopal Church arrived here in 1824. It actually arrived in Michigan territories, so before Northwest Territories, before Michigan was even a state. It is the oldest Protestant entity to come into the Northwest Territories in the country. So, into the Northwest Territories. So 1824 they show up. 1907, after a couple of other buildings, you know, further down Woodward and closer to the river, came and went. In 1907, this building was commissioned, and an architect who builds and is known for building churches, Ralph Adams Cram, actually designed this building. So this is a late Gothic, English Gothic, late Gothic style. It's in that flying buttress or buttress style building. And if you've never seen it before, never heard of it before, its primary aspect is that there are no visible internal supports. The whole idea of this structure is that the walls support the roof and the roof supports the wall. They press against each other intentionally, and it keeps the whole thing up. This is an unbelievable building inside. Its architectural significance is owed to, one, the beauty of the structure, the stained glass windows, and even the floor. So if you start in front of this building and walk all the way to the dais, all the way to the altar at the front, it has palabic tile. I don't know if everybody's familiar with palabic tile. The church does. So the floor actually is decked out in palabic tile. So here's this iconic tile, right? Produced right here in the city of Detroit, late 1800s. Mary Chase Stratton and her partner started developing this iridescent clay and this iridescent firing process, and it caught on like wildfire and was incorporated in buildings throughout the country and throughout the world, and is still in business. They're still in business on East Jefferson. Anyway, so the floor of this building goes all the way from the door all the way to the altar, and it goes from sort of a rusty iridescent brown to this incredible cobalt blue that goes all the way to the altar. It is actually one of the largest installations of palabic tile in the country. You're right across the street. Wow. Yep. So okay. The other ones are like in the National Cathedral in New York, or Washington D.C., excuse me, and in other places around the country. I think the National Cathedral has the largest. But this was an Episcopal church, and Episcopal church were frequently very well-heeled, very well-attended churches. Folks like Henry Ford and his wife Clara attended this church. This was the Ford Church. As a matter of fact, Ford was such a prominent member of this church, and although there are a lot of things in his history and in his reputation that I've come not to appreciate, there was no getting around the fact that his ideas and the industrial might of Ford Motor Company literally put the planet on wheels. And so in 1947, when Henry Ford died in April, they still had the house in Dearborn called Fairlane. So they still had that mansion and property, and well-wishers and mourners showed up at the house. About 5,000 people showed up at the house. But 20,000 people showed up and filled the street outside the church the next morning. So there was still, church was very prominent. Ford family, of course, is very prominent. And it's also had been the family church to the Menon family, so Menon Speed Stick, and you've seen these commercials. That was the Menon family that used this church or attended this church. There's something missing on this church, though, as amazing as it is. As you look at it, gentlemen, can you point out a spot where something seems to be missing?
The original roof?
No, roof's always been there. Well, actually, it's a metal roof. You're right.
Yeah.
So the original roof is not there, but something maybe a little further back in the structure is missing. Bell tower.
Oh, okay.
So the vestry, they could never, so the council for the church, 1928, they were considering improvements and finally considering putting the bell tower up. And they just kept arguing. They just could not, they didn't want to spend the money. And even though money was free flowing in 1928 before the bottom fell out, they couldn't decide, so it never got built. When you go in today, you actually can tour this church, and if you go in the administrative offices on the back, you can see the original written plans that included the tower. But money's money. People still argue about it. So all right, well, let's move along.